Hey everybody, quick question for you so I can adjust the background lighting. What is your favorite color? Green? Okay, I like your style. Hold on a minute. All right, there we go. Thanks for the suggestion, everybody. It turned out great. All right, so what do I have for you today? Well, we're going to be talking about Chapter 1159. Nothing specific yet. I'm basically just going to go through another run through the chapter because there's a few things in the review that I forgot to bring up and I got distracted by other things going on. Did you know Gil Bastar shows up in a panel? I didn't even notice that. There's a lot of other stuff people are talking about right now, like Dragon's Devil Fruit or something. I guess we'll talk about that too. But Gil Bastar was in this chapter, and I completely missed the guy. He was in the panel when Harold was talking to Rox, and you see Shiki grumbling about not being able to go to God Valley to save Shaki. You also see Silveraxe and Gil back there. It's great, okay? So, yeah, we'll dive into a bunch of different topics here through the chapter. Does that sound good to you? That sounds good to me. Does that sound good to you, Barry? That sounds good to Barry. Does that sound good to you, Karu? Many of you might be wondering why Karu is here right now and what he has to do with any of this. Oh, Karu has everything to do with this. Karu was born in the fires of God Valley. That's not true. He's just a duck, but it's cool to see Karu, you know. It's just he's had it rough lately ever since Vivi was, you know, kidnapped by a shadowy ruler of the world government, and then after that, you know, she left and on a blimp with a giant bird. I mean, it's been tough for him. Okay, we're here to support you, Karu. All right, so how about we start off with Dragon, because everybody's talking about Dragon. All right, let's get that one out of the way. God Valley is probably the place where Dragon got his really powerful devil fruit. Yeah, probably. I mean, it makes the most sense. So in this backstory, Dragon is 17 years old. He is a recruit in the Marines. We do not know what rank he holds, but it's definitely not an officer rank. I said in the chapter review, it's probably like Seaman First Class, maybe not even that, right? He might be just like absolutely new recruit right out of basic training, and this is the first thing he got dropped into. Really, really pulled the short straw on that one, I gotta say. And we see him in this chapter, and he's questioning authority and everything like that, right? We also see him at the end meeting the mother of Shanks and Shamrock, and that's going to come up into a thing here in a moment. So Dragon has one of the strongest devil fruits in the entire world. We do not know what its name is. We do not know what category it's in, and we honestly don't even know exactly what the power does specifically. It has the ability to manipulate storms, but that could be broken up into a bunch of different powers. Does he have the ability to just, like, snap his fingers and summon a storm? Like, maybe that would be a Paramecia storm fruit, you know, like Storm's ability from X-Men or something. Or is it like a Logia, like the wind fruit, like the Kaze no Mi? And so he doesn't actually, like, spawn the storms. He just kind of uses the power of wind to push the storms somewhere else. You know, so we have that scene at Logtown when a storm just blows in out of nowhere. Although there is also the scene when Luffy's about to get his head lopped off by Buggy the Clown, and then lightning happens to strike right at that moment to save his ass. You know, Luffy's ass made it out of that barely alive. Actually, honestly, Luffy almost died there. Buggy almost killed Luffy. That's what I like about that scene. It wasn't played up as like, oh, Luffy could get out of this no problem. Oh, I'm just messing around, guys. Zoro and Sanji couldn't reach him in time. It wasn't like, okay, time to stop playing around. Let's save our captain. No, Luffy almost died, all right? And then right at that exact moment, lightning struck. Seemed to imply that Dragon willed the lightning. Like, yeah, my son's not getting killed by a clown pirate. That's not happening. Bring down the thunderclap. And then he, you know, activated Kieran and you know, blasted Buggy apart, right? Okay. Or maybe it was all coincidence. Maybe it was just divine intervention. Who knows, right? There's also popular theories out there he could have a mythical zone, because there's any number of mythical creatures out there that have the ability to control the very weather and raw power of nature. So that could work as well. So a lot of things are up to debate here about his devil fruit exactly, but God Valley being a place with a bunch of treasure, all these rare devil fruits that are compiled together to be the rewards, the champions' prizes in this tournament that the Celestial Dragons are holding, it would make sense that there's a devil fruit in there that is of that quality. Now, why was this devil fruit never mentioned before? And also, I was kind of distracted by how there's more treasure chests at the end of this chapter than there were. I went back and checked. Yes, there were only 6 treasure chests during the flashback at God Valley when we were getting Kuma's side of the story. legendary, right? And now there are 9, plus an additional grand prize that is Shocky. Okay, so there's 9 treasure chests now. So maybe Oda went back and he was like, oh no, I want to include a few more, like, rewards in there, some more rare devil fruits. And it's like, ooh, okay, so that's interesting, right? All right. So we know 2 of them. We know one was the Pawpaw fruit, which was consumed by Kuma, and we know the other one was the Azure Dragon fruit that was ultimately consumed by Kaido. Ivankov opened the chest, Big Mom grabbed it, and then eventually ended up giving it to Kaido, and Kaido had the power, obviously. Now, the reason no other devil fruits were probably mentioned is because Ginny was the one that gathered this information together, and they were only interested in getting off the island. That was the only thing they needed to worry about right now. There were other rewards. There were other prizes. The fact that Shocky was there was irrelevant to Ivankov and Ginny and Kuma's plan to escape the island with as many people as they possibly could, all right? So instead of going through, like, why bother giving information that's worthless, right? Oh, guys, there's a bunch of devil fruits that are for prizes. Let me list all of them off. Okay, here are, like, a bunch of prizes, but there's only 2 we need to worry about. That's useless information for them, right? The 2 that we need to worry about are the Pawpaw fruit and the Dragon fruit. You get your hands on one of those, we're set. We can get out of here, right? Everything else is irrelevant. Now, I guess you could also say that if it is like a mythical zone that Dragon has, like the, Quetzalcoatl kind of devil fruit or something like that, that allows him to turn into like a flying serpent or something of like, Mesoamerican lore, that would also be useful in escaping the island, just like the Dragon fruit. So it probably isn't a mythical zone or something that could fly. If it was a Paramecia storm fruit, or the ability to turn into wind, that might not have been efficient in getting off the island, in the same way that a flying dragon or a teleportation devil fruit like the Pawpaw fruit gives you, okay? So maybe it wasn't relevant there. But yeah, it's very likely that one of the numerous treasure chests contained a devil fruit, and then Dragon, the way that he would have stumbled upon that devil fruit is we know that Shanks ends up in one of them. Now, when we see Shanks in that treasure chest, because we don't see it in the actual manga or in the anime, we see it in a promotional manga that was released with Film Red. Like, you go to the theater in Japan and you would get like a little pamphlet, and that's where the little manga chapter would be, where Roger and his crew open up the treasure chest and they see Shanks in there, okay? That treasure chest also contained actual treasure. It contained gold doubloons, and I think like there was a mirror or like a gemstone in there too. And Shanks was on top of it, just, being a baby, just like, goo goo gaga, I'm just having a great time, not traumatized at all from God Valley, okay? So, when Kuma and Ivankov opened up the treasure chests, and when they had the Pawpaw fruit and the Dragon fruit, that's all that was in there. There was nothing else. I would assume not every single treasure chest also contains a devil fruit, so there weren't 9 devil fruits up there. Some of them might have actually just contained valuable gemstones and things like that, which it's like loot boxes for the Tenryubito, which I'm assuming they would be disappointed in. If it's like, oh, all I got was 1 billion berries worth in gold. I wanted a devil fruit. It would probably have been something like that, right? So we also know there were different colors of the treasure chests. Some were white treasure chests, some were black. So maybe the ones that were like different colors had more valuable like rewards in them or something like that. I don't really know exactly. Now, that's all about Dragon's devil fruit. Like, he opened up the chest to put baby Shanks in there. Why would Dragon put baby Shanks inside of a treasure chest? Well, it was kind of a shitty situation, and there wasn't really a lot of options. I doubt he would have been able to take the baby with him, because what's Dragon as like a Marine recruit going to do with a baby? It might have been too risky to do that, okay? So Dragon's perspective there might have been like, okay, I don't have a lot of options. I can't take the baby with me, so I got to put it in a treasure chest. Pirates are probably going to find the treasure chest. Hopefully they won't kill the child. A child being raised by pirates isn't a great, prospect, but at least the child might be still alive at the end of it. I guess maybe that was Dragon's perspective. He opens up the treasure chest. He sees the devil fruit. He's like, ooh, a devil fruit. Okay, take that out, put the baby in, close it, and then just hope for the best and then go off. You know what I mean? Dragon is no stranger to abandoning children. So this comes maybe second nature to him by the time Luffy was born. Okay. That was mean. I mean, Dragon is running a revolutionary army. He's trying to save the world and everything like that. So, I'm sorry. He wasn't a father towards Luffy, though. That is canon, okay? So, here's a question, though, and this is something that's very interesting, right? I originally assumed this could be handled by just, like, Dragon writing a note, but the question is, how did Roger know Shanks' name was Shanks? Because Shanks was a baby. Although, you could have it where baby Shanks might have just said, like, Shanks, you know what I mean? Like, because Shanks was like a year old at this point, you know, so Roger would be like, what be your name, baby? And Shanks was like, oh, okay, that was easy, you know, so Shanks might have been able to speak at this point. Shanks might have been able to mumble out the word Shanks, like know his own name, you know what I mean? So that's possible, right? But if that's not what happened, it would be even funnier because their names might have gotten mixed up, okay? So for one thing, Garling apparently just went with the names that the mother gave the kids. Some people were questioning that, like, wait a minute, so it's like, oh, darling, you're back. These are our children, Shanks and Shamrock. Oh, okay. Well, they're going to go stay with me at Marijois. You're going to stay here and bleed out. What? Why would I bleed out? Ah! You know? And then Garling is like, all right, Shanks and Shamrock. I have completely forgotten which one's which. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You're coming with me, right? So I guess Garling was not like, I'm going to change the names. I guess Garling was okay with the names, all right? So the scenario, though, at the end of the chapter is Dragon walks in on the mother who's dying in this random house on God Valley, and she's bleeding out, and she's like, please, you have to save my children. Make sure he doesn't get them, you know? Okay, make sure that my kids are safe, all right? So if we're going to, like, extend that scene the way that it would go, she would have to describe her, like, okay, my two children, my two babies, Shanks and Shamrock, they're twins. They have red hair. You have to save them. And then she dies, and it's very dramatic and sad. And, you know, maybe she dies in Dragon's arms, like, no, I joined the Marines for justice. This is not justice. No, I will save your children, ma'am. Do not worry. So he runs off. Shamrock and Shanks get separated at some point. I don't exactly know how this went down. Garling, I don't think, had the babies on him when he was fighting in the tournament, so he had to maybe give the babies off to, like, somebody else, like his assistant or somebody, and then maybe that assistant gets killed, and then the babies land, and then Shanks, you know, like, maybe Shamrock stays in one spot, but Shanks, like, wanders off and stuff, and that's when Dragon runs into him. But how would Dragon know Shanks from Shamrock? Because they're identical twins. So he could just write a note that's like, hello, my name is Baby Shanks. Please don't kill me. And then he writes that, like, little post-it note on Shanks, puts it in a treasure chest, just like, here you go, and just wish for the best. But honestly, all of this could be solved by Shanks and Shamrock just being able to speak their own names at like a year old or a little over a year old, which I think that would be okay. You know, they would be able to do that. All right. So that's probably the situation there. We also see baby Blackbeard in the last chapter. That's crazy. What's even crazier is people taking this into a direction I didn't even expect. People are throwing out the idea now that Blackbeard's mom is also Luffy's mom. Because Blackbeard's mom was there. They were both in the cage, and they were both, you know, going to be released for the hunting competition and everything like that. So what if Dragon ends up meeting Blackbeard's mom, Rox's wife, and, like, they fall in love, Rox dies, and so Dragon and this woman go off and live together for a brief moment of time. I don't think this works. Luffy's not going to be born for like another 20 years almost. It's 38 years ago from God Valley. Luffy's 19, so it's going to be a while until Luffy is born. So I don't think that's the way that goes down. Although Dragon running into Tritoma, I did a video about that a little while ago. That is still feasible and possible at this point. Tritoma is an active member of the Kuja. She is the Empress and the captain of the Kuja Pirates at this point. And then Dragon probably pretty soon after this event isn't going to be in the Marines anymore. We know 22 years ago he was, well, actually, I think 25, 26 years ago is when Kuma was reading that newspaper about him leading the Freedom Fighters. So that's about 10 years or so after God Valley. I'm assuming he stays in the Marines for a little while. Maybe he starts thinking like, okay, maybe it's just bad because I'm a recruit now and I'm just getting started. Maybe once I climb the ranks in the Marines and become an officer, maybe then I can change some things. Dragon might have achieved, like, maybe Dragon might have even have reached Vice Admiral. It might not, because he's a pretty strong guy, and maybe if he gets that Devil Fruit, even stronger or something. But then eventually he realizes, like, it doesn't matter how long I stay in the Marines. I'm never going to be able to change from within the organization, so I need to go off and do my own thing, right? So I'm assuming it's still going to be a little while. He didn't leave the Marines immediately, but it's just year after year, even despite all of the ranks he achieves and accolades he stacks up for himself, like, oh, I'm a good Marine. It's just not changing. And so he realizes, like, okay, I need to go off and do my own separate thing, right? And then maybe he meets Tritoma at that point, and then, you know, that might be Luffy's mom. It's very possible. She would have died, like, 6 years after Luffy was born, though. You know, and there's a whole thing with the Kuja only giving birth to children that are girls. It's possible that that could have only been the thing if they are born on Amazon Lily and maybe born somewhere else. They can give birth to boys. We don't really know exactly how that whole thing works, but it's still very possible, right? It would also be an interesting misdirect from Oda, for Oda to be like, oh, only girls are born on Amazon Lily, which immediately excludes like any Kuja to be the father, to be the mother of Luffy. But it'd be like, oh, that only applies for the island. Anywhere outside of the island, and it's perfectly fine, so that could work too. I already talked about Gil Bastar being there. Gil Bastar is the main character of Wanted, which is one of Oda's very first works. I mean, it actually might be like one of his first ever things that he drew that got publicized in Jump. And so he's like this Old West gunslinger kind of guy with a hat and cool shades, you know, fastest gun in the West sort of deal. At God Valley, he has 4 arms. That was when he was alive, too. When he's a zombie, he also has 4 arms. He was the zombie with 4 arms at Thriller Bark. You know, the 4-arm zombie. You know that guy, right? Yeah, but yeah, we see him when Harold is meeting with Rox there, and Rox explains that his true name is Davy D. Zebek. And so there was a transition into that. Okay. First of all, I want to apologize to Chopper, because in the review, I'm like, okay, well, at least we know the Will of D is not Davy. It doesn't just stand for Davy, because come on now, his full name would be Davy Jones? What kind of stupid name is that? Who has the same name twice? And then everyone was like, I think you just made Chopper cry because he's Tony Chopper. It's, oh, Chopper, I'm so sorry. Your name is good. You have a good name, Chopper. It's fine. It's not stupid. It's okay, Chopper. He's like, what, did you making fun of my name? It's like, no, Chopper, it's fine. Here, look, gave you that name. I don't know why he gave you that name, but, you know, I guess he just loved the name Tony. He was a big fan of old Tony from Isekai D&D. That's why Hiralook named you that. He named you that twice because he cared. Okay, but yeah, I mean, that would be another misdirect, you know, like, oh, Davy Jones. They won't expect that. All right, well, once again, I will say this about the Will of D, and I've said this before. The Will of D representing just a single word, and that's it. Like, it means dawn, or it means devil, or it means duty, or whatever. I meant duty as, like, the duty to a particular way of thinking, or, like, a group, not duty as in poop. Although, that's what it meant the whole time. It just meant poop. All right, yeah. But no, like, no matter what singular word it represents, Davy, dawn, whatever, it would be kind of, you know, anticlimactic, because literally every single word that starts with the letter D has been proposed for what the Will of D is. So for it to be someone's name, like Davy, that, like, yes, it just means the Will of Davy, but there's more to it than that. What is the Will of Davy Jones? Who was Davy Jones? How was Davy Jones? When was Davy Jones? Where is Davy Jones? You know, all these questions we have, that's what really matters by the Will of D. So, like, okay, yeah, it could still just be Davy. It's like when we finally find out what the One Piece is. When we learn about the One Piece, and then let's assume somebody that hasn't even started reading One Piece, like in the far future, like 20 years from now, right? Like the One Piece is well known, and you could just look it up on the wiki, and everybody knows what it is. You know, somebody that just starts reading One Piece for the first time is like, oh, well, what is it? And I'd be like, listen, I could tell you what it is, but unless you read the whole story and you understand the context, it might not mean anything to you, right? So, like, at the very, like, you could have a complete newcomer to One Piece open up chapter 1 of Romance Dawn and be like, hey, what is the D in Luffy's name means? It means Davy. Okay, Davy what? Yeah, see, it doesn't make any sense. You have to read the story to make it make sense, right? It's like one of those things, right? So, yeah, could be that. Also, keeping track of the name changing, Davy D. Jones was a notorious pirate back during the Void Century, could have known Joy Boy. They might have been even the same person. All right, we don't know. We don't know. It also could be two different clans. I brought that up in the review. Like, we have Joy Boy's clan that eventually ends up being like the Peacemain pirates, like Luffy. And then we have Davy D. Jones's clan, which ends up being more of the Morganeer kind of pirate, like Blackbeard. There it is, right? Also, a lot of people for the whole thing with Blackbeard's mom also being Luffy's mom. There's an idea there because, like, Luffy and Blackbeard are very similar. I really would not like that idea if Oda went in that direction personally. They don't need to be long-lost siblings in order to be, like, you know, opposites, but also still have some things in common, like that scene at Jaya when they, you know, Luffy hated the pie, but Blackbeard loved it. Luffy loved the juice, but Blackbeard hated it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have them be actual siblings in order for this to be the thing, right? I think the overall theme of like inherited will in One Piece means so much more, is more palpable as a storytelling element. I don't know, that's the best way for me to describe it, right? But yeah, anyway, so we had Davy D. Jones, and now we have Roxy Xebec. Roxy Xebec's real name is Davy D. Xebec. All right. So the name Rox, I guess he just invented. He was just like, oh, I'm just going with the name Rox. Okay, great. And then we have Marshall D. Teach, who is Blackbeard, who is the son of Roxy Xebec, but is not Roxy Teach or Davy D. Teach, but is still a member of that clan. Okay, so I would imagine one of the reasons why the world government hasn't located a lot of the survivors of the Davy clan, and there also may not be very many of them left, is they probably all changed their name at this point. Also, that was probably the thing that Garling mentioned. I don't know how exactly Garling knew that Blackbeard was a member of the Davy clan. Maybe the government learned that Rox is a member of the Davy clan, and then when they figured out that, like, oh, this child is Rox's child, maybe they connected the dots there, not really sure. But yeah, the fact that Blackbeard was present on the island is the hometown of Rox, and then, you know, oh, I don't want you, my wife and child, to grow up on Hachinosu. That's too unsafe. I'm going to send you back to my homeland in the West Blue. Nothing bad ever happens there. Oh, boy. Right. So, at the very least, we know Blackbeard makes it out alive. And then he does some pretty awful things later on in the story, but at least we know, like, baby Blackbeard makes it out alive. Yeah. All right. So there's that. Let's see. Dragon's Devil Fruit, we talked about that. Gil Bastar, talked about him. Wang Zhi. Not really that much about Wang in this chapter, other than that Wang is a dick. So I will now change the hype train to Gonzui. Oh, yeah, everybody. Gonzui. That's our man right now. He's going to be the guy. He's going to die soon, and Wang isn't. But I'm going to go with Gonzui for the rest of this trip. Okay. So, in the review, I mentioned that maybe Wang has the power of the Numa Numa no Mi, the swamp fruit. And that was the fruit that he used to kidnap Shaki and then bring her over to the government, okay? Because that fruit is kind of designed for that. A lot of people, a lot of very astute viewers brought up that, wait a minute, Matt, that can't be possible because we know Caribou has that ability, and we know that Wang was still alive at least up until the Payback War, or like around the Payback War, during the Rocky Port incident. Rocky Port incident. It's another reference to rocks, isn't it? I was like, okay, whatever. Anyway, so we know we have Caribou, who was alive and was like a rookie at that time, having the Numa Numa no Mi. Wang was also still alive. Wang might still be alive. We don't know. He could also be dead, which at this point, fine, whatever. But we know he did rule over Hachinosu for like 37 years after God Valley. And honestly, we don't see Wang Zhi at God Valley. So maybe, yeah, like Wang went up to Rox and was just like, hey there, Rox, you're going after Shaki. Okay, well, I'll hang back here on Hachinosu. I'll make sure everything's good. Rox is like, yeah, good idea, Wang. You need to hang out here. You're trustworthy. Watch over the place while I'm gone. I mean, like, somebody had to stay on the island, right? Or everybody was so obsessed with Shaki, they all left. Literally, Hachinosu got emptied out of pirates to go after Shakuyaku at God Valley, and Wang was the one dude that was like, wait a minute. all I gotta do is stay here and I get a free pirate island. Yeah, everything's coming up Wang, and he just stayed on the island. Maybe there was a few other like low-level pirates and he just started his pirate cult, like, worship me now, Rox is dead, I am your new god. And then they were all like, okay, we worship you, Wang. What if Wang had a devil fruit ability that worked on manipulating people in some way? He was a pirate cultist after all, or like a guru, and he did lead Hachinosu like that for almost 4 decades, right? He wasn't ousted by Blackbeard until like just recently, like a year ago. All right, I guess it would be, well, no, I mean like 38 years ago after Rox leaves, and then a year before the time skip. Yeah, so like, yeah, it would be 37 years, right? So what if his devil fruit is like allows to manipulate people and draw them together and like, oh yes, we worship you, God Wang, something like that, right? And that's how he took over the island. But yeah, he could not have had the Numa Numa Nomi at least. Last thing I want to bring up here is when Harold was meeting with Rox, and they were talking about that whole thing with the world government observing them and everything. I went on this long spiel in the review trying to figure out, like, okay, the government offered Harold a deal to kill Rox and become a member of the government, but Rox is not dead yet, but Rox does die eventually, and Elbaph is a part of the world government. And a lot of people brought up, well, wait a minute, Elbaph isn't part of the world government right now in the story, so they never were part of the world government. I'm like, well, yeah, you're right. They aren't part of the world government now. But going back through some of this flashback and a couple of things that Loki says and some stuff the Gods Knights say, like Summers and Shamrock and everybody when they're on Elbaph, Elbaph might have been part of the government for a very brief amount of time, okay? What I mean by this is, in Chapter 1152, at the very beginning of this flashback, when Loki arrives at the castle, right? So this was 14 years ago, when Loki walks in and sees his dad getting stabbed, okay? He talks to Jarl about how, oh, my dad is a government dog, and I'm never going to listen to that government dog, right? Or he also mentions, I can't believe he sold out to the people that killed Rox, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean at that point that Elbaph was part of the world government, but it does kind of lend to the idea that at that point it could have been. And then also, remember when the Gods Knights were there, they were talking about like, oh, Shamrock, are you going to go see Harold's grave? He could have been saying that mockingly. He could have been meaning that seriously. There was also the line that, Harold, what are you doing? You were supposed to build an army of mercenaries for the government. It was kind of setting it up like, Harold, you had a job to do and you failed. Once again, none of this tells that Harold managed to get Elbaph into the world government. But one way I'm looking at this is that after Rox does die, Harold works a little bit more, and they are able to get into the world government. World government representatives, i.e. the Gods Knights, go to Elbaph, set up the summoning circle, have regular meetings with Harold, and Harold was in talks with them to be like, okay, we're now officially part of the government. You need some soldiers to fight your battles. Okay, I guess that's only fair. Okay, and he was starting to work on that. And then whatever happened, happened. I mean, the way the Gods Knights kind of talk about this is that, like the idea that Emu could have just Domi reversied Harold, maybe he did, and maybe he didn't act the way that they expected that he would act. Maybe Emu doesn't have complete control over it or whatever, because it seems like what happened was a surprise to Loki, and it was also a surprise to the government and the Gods Knights and Emu's side as well. Shit did not go down the way they planned it from both parties. There was some weird, like, complication maybe that led to everything ending up the way it did, right? But there's still a good chunk of time from the end of God Valley 38 years ago to the death of Harold 14 years ago. That is 24 years of time where Rox is dead at this point, and maybe Elbaph was part of the world government. Maybe they were only part of it for a very brief amount of time. Maybe news didn't spread to the whole world yet before shit went south. But it's very possible they could have been, is the way that I was looking at that anyway, all right? So I just wanted to, like, kind of clarify there at the end when Loki was there talking about it at the beginning of this flashback that's only taking 3 minutes. Now, to be fair, the way the flashback is going is like, okay, Harudin, let me tell you the story of the worst day of my life. Well, I arrived at the castle, and I opened up the throne room, and I saw Dad getting stabbed by all of his guards. All right. stop, and then all the other things in this flashback, that's not Loki's story. That's not Loki telling this story. Maybe Loki's throwing a little bit of references to rocks in there, the parts he was there for, but everything else is like narrator or Panda Man telling the story, and then it's going to go back to Loki, and he's going to finish it all up, and so we'll tie it all nice back into like a bow at the end of this, but yeah, it's still going on, where we got a while left for this flashback. Yeah, I don't know exactly how long this one is compared to like Odin's. I have to go back and check, but I think it started at 11:52 and it's 11:59, so like it's been 7 chapters already, and we're probably going to still be in the flashback coming up here, so that'll be 8 chapters. I'd have to go back and check to see how long Odin's was, but it was also a pretty long one. Anyway, that's the video. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching 101 signing out. Later, everybody.